Hello and welcome to Candidates on the Clock, hosted by the Newton County Chamber of Commerce. I'm your host, Lanier Sims. Today we're joined by Surrea Ivy, that's running for U.S. Congress, District 4. Miss Ivy, could you take a few minutes to tell the voters a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. My name, of course, is Surrea Ivy. I have been in sustainability management for about 15 years of my life. Not quite how people perceive it to be. Think a little bit more in terms of undercover boss. Fortune 500 and 1,000 companies hire me to come in and just kind of work alongside their teams, help them develop strategies to meet company goals and expectations, and then build the morale and the team talent necessary to execute it. In light of everything that has been going on in our government, I think a person of my caliber is necessary because there's a lot of goals and expectations in the citizens that are not being met. And I really think it comes from a lack of strategic planning. I think it comes from a lot of not being able to forecast and forethink. And understanding consequence. Like, you've got to be able to map it out. We've got to stop focusing on the present day situations without regard for the future implications that it can be. So I threw my hat into the ring. I'm a mother of a 6-year-old. I just had a deceased daughter in October of last year. And I'm a wife of 11 years to my husband, who was my best friend. We never dated. Can you imagine that? We never dated. Went straight from friendship to marriage. That's a whole nother story. But happily married. I am a licensed ordained minister. Now, I'm not a pastor. I never pastored. I teach biblical studies, hermeneutics, things of that kind of nature, and eschatology. But mostly the most thing that I want the citizens to understand is that I'm concerned. I'm one of you. I have to ballot the budget like everybody else, and I'm concerned about the future for not only my child, but even myself. I mean, we have present day situations that are impacting us right now, and it's things that our children and grandchildren are going to have to pay for. And I think it's time that you have a leader that can step in strategically, unemotionally, not with a whole lot of baggage, a lot of rhetoric, going back and forth between the parties, but that can put the people first. And I'm that kind of candidate.
Okay, thank you. As you're aware, we had citizens to submit some questions that they wanted you guys to answer. So let's just jump in. First question is, what's your view, or how are you planning to address climate change?
I think that it's super important that we understand we have but one Earth, and it's the only one that can sustain the life force, so I think it should be a priority. But I do believe that we could take care of the planet without bankrupting its citizens. I think that some of the strategies that are coming out of DC right now is extremely extreme. There's some basic things that we can do. I'm a firm believer that the best way to correct government is the people. So I would put it back into the communities. I would give incentives to businesses to use recyclable material to produce things. I would give incentives to businesses to use clean energy, things of that nature. I would not make it the burden necessarily of the citizens through tax and inflation to get it done. I think that's extreme, especially coming off the heels of a pandemic. I think it's almost disrespectful to the current condition that people are in, but there are strategic things you can do. I don't understand why our government feels like you have to trade one for the other. You don't. You can do them both. So have your businesses, especially those who made record gains during the pandemic, go ahead and do some recyclable materials in the manufacturing of your products and your services. Use clean energy to do that. You can do that as a business and a corporation. We'll give you a good tax write-off for that. Encourage the community to do that. Recycle. I remember back in the day, and I'm 42, but back in the day, the way I got my money, because I lived in the projects, I was back in the day when food stamps was in books. like coupons. The way I got my money is that we would go out on the weekend on the back of my mom's truck and we would pick up cans in the community and we'd take it to the recycle bin and we would get a little bit of change for recycling. That's taking care of the environment. That'd be a great way to teach kids responsibility for the environment. Great way to teach kids responsibility, period. That things don't come for free, that what you work for is what you get. So I think those kind of things would be advantageous for us to do as a society without putting an extraordinary burden on us financially.
Okay, thank you. As you're aware, the Build Back Better plan is currently stalled in Congress. What provisions, if any, would you support, or what's your views on the Build Back Better plan?
See, plans like the Build Back Better plan reminds me of dangling a carrot dipped in formaldehyde in front of homeless people who are hungry. Sure, it'll fill your belly, but it's also going to go corrode your stomach and your esophagus. So I think that when you congest a bunch of issues in one type of bill, you solve nothing. The only way that you're able to solve an issue is you have to target it and be intentional about it. You can't just clump it together and say, oh, look, we got it. No, we don't. We are a burdened society due to a pandemic. Whether you believe that it was orchestrated or whether you believe it was random, it matters not, it occurred. And people suffered for it, so you've got to deal with the issues one-on-one. I do believe infrastructure, especially in the Atlanta area, is super important, but when I look at the Build Back Better plan, a minute part of that plan is for infrastructure, and given what we have already in place and the mismanagement of funds and activities that are going on, I'm not sure I would trust whether or not that money came in here that would actually allocate. A lot of the issues I have with Build Back Better is not that it doesn't target the issues that are important and germane to the people, it's just it's not good strategy. It just, the execution of it is poor, because you just look at the PPP loans, look at the stimulus checks. It's a great idea to try to bail people out, but look at how the fraud that occurred in those type of strategies. You're not planning for execution. You're not looking at monitoring and allocation and all that kind of stuff. You can't just hemorrhage money out and say, hey, I think you're going to do a great job. No, you need to have plans and markers in place to make sure that money is not squandered. Make sure it gets directly to its target, and you can't do that with a blanket bill. You cannot, especially that bill, you cannot do that. So if you want to take care of pre-K and education, then formulate a bill that's strategic for pre-K and education, and make sure that you have checks and balances in there, because human nature is human nature. If everybody was going to do what was supposed to be right, we wouldn't have prisons as full as they are right now. So put checks and balances, follow it all the way through. If you want to do infrastructure, then put an infrastructure bill out there. Make sure it comes with its checks and its balances, that you're able to monitor and be able to minimize as much waste and liability. It's basic economics, it's basic business.
Thank you. Thank you. What are your plans to bring federal funds back to not only your district, but to Newton County, to help it be a better place to live, work, and play?
That's a loaded question.
I know.
It's a very loaded question. The reason I say that is because it's very easy for me to sit here based on CNN information and relationships and say, hey, I'm going to do this, this, this. But what we tend to find out is when you get in a position, the story is completely different from what you see. And right now, with a lot of the things that are coming out of Congress right now and the back and forth between the parties, I am not sure that the information that we have is exactly what it is, but I can tell you what I would advocate for. I would definitely advocate for some form of infrastructure. I think that opportunity zones have been totally missed in our particular area, especially with the demographic of the fourth. Opportunity zones is the biggest way to pull people out of poverty, to feed the entrepreneurial spirit. And we know that America's economy is like completely fueled and sustained by small businesses and entrepreneurs and things of that nature. And I think that I would advocate for that type of support for the Newton area, for Rockdale, for DeKalb. Because when I drive through and I look at different things that's going on, I'm thinking, boy, that would be a great opportunity zone if we can get that crime rate down. You know, if we can build the education community, because we know that crime and education is what deters businesses from coming. And so if we could just get that under control, we could bring this in here. I mean, I've even thought about Delta coming, putting a headquarters, here, but who's going to do that when you have a crime rate that's outrageous in your academic performance, you barely can read or write. So these are the kind of things that I would advocate for bringing into Newton. Let's get some opportunity zones. Let's get some grant funding in here. But in addition to that, I would work with state legislatures because those are state issues. I would work with state legislatures and our government to make sure that once those funds get here, they're appropriately allocated. It's about tracking and follow through. That's what I'm looking at, is I would track and follow through. But I would definitely push mostly opportunity zones, I think, and infrastructure would be the best for our area.
Next question. do you support, or what's your views on term limits in Congress?
Absolutely, I want out as soon as possible. Not meaning that in a degrading way. I'm throwing my hat in there because I want it. I want to be your congresswoman. But I always believe, my grandmother used to tell me all the time that, who you hang around with is who you become. And the more I get involved in the political arena, you have to be very careful when you have power. I'm a believer. I'm a Christian, as I said to the viewers before. And I'm a firm believer that we have this propensity in us to go the wrong way. That's why I believe we have a guard and a protection in us. And when you vest, the way that I see the congressional seat is that millions of people are trusting me with their lives. Their livelihoods and their futures are in my hands, and it's predicated on the decisions that I make. And that's a weighty responsibility. That is a heavy responsibility, and it's one that I don't believe that I should carry for a long period of time. Now, I normally say 3 terms in the House. I say 2 terms in the Senate. But in light of the chaos that has occurred in our Congress, I'm going to say it's going to take about 4 terms in order to get stuff done. Now, typically I would say 3 and go. But right now, we're going to need 1 term by itself to clean up houses, as I say. Let's get some of this excessive legislation off the table. Let's put a little no to some of this spending and printing money like you use toilet paper. This kind of stuff needs to cease and desist. So there's a cleanup. So you need that little window to clean up, and then 3 terms would be it, and you need to go. Because we should never aspire to make control our career. It should never be that way. You should be paving the way for the next generation of ideals and the next generation. Because see, that's what the House of Representatives is about. It is the democratic leg of our constitutional republic that allows the voice of the people to be heard. And each generation has a new sound. And so while I have caught the sound of this generation, my daughter has a different sound. And so we need to be careful to make the way for that to occur.
Okay, thank you. Next question, we're going to talk a little bit about the increasing inflation. So the question is, at what point do you think the federal government should implement wage and price controls to slow this increasing inflation? I can reword it to say, what are your views to, or what do you believe the federal government should be doing to help curb this inflation?
I think they need to learn a 2-letter word that says no. And I know that's very difficult, especially when you come from a very wealthy and luxurious society such as we've built. But one of the reasons that we're able to enjoy such pleasures is because we've had systems of people. We have had a string of people who understood the necessity of preserving the very nature and identity of America. And now we have a bunch of people who just want to fight all the time and just argue all the time and don't realize that the rest of the world is caught up in your chaos. So I'm kind of the persuasion that somebody needs to get into Congress, i.e. myself, and put them in timeout and just say, listen, go sit in the corner and think about yourself while we figure this out. Because while you're fighting and arguing and bickering back and forth, there are people who $100 won't even feed a house of 3 for a whole week. It takes almost $100 just to get to work. It's almost not cost effective for me to go to work at all. So there's some serious things that need to go in. So I think we need to learn the letter no. And I think that people in our society needs to understand sacrifice a little bit. Like now, I don't make a ton of money. I don't have millions of dollars. All you gotta do is check my FEC report. You'll see, we don't have it. The reality of the circumstance is this. If I want the new iPhone, but my rent is due, one of them is gonna get a no, and I guarantee you it's not gonna be my rent. Do you get what I'm saying? And I might put back so later on I can get that phone. And I think that's something that our government could benefit from. You can never pay your way out of issues. And the reality of it is you can only live on credit so long before you have to file bankruptcy. And right now, with the PP loan situations that occurred, with the stimulus checks that were hemorrhaging out, and people were, when is it that it's even better for you to sit at home than to go to work? That is an actual reversal of the very identity of America. That should have been the first clue that was a bad move. But we've already done it. We've got here. We need to learn the power of the word no. And that's what I'm going to bring to Congress.
Okay. Thank you. Our next question is, what will you do to support voters' rights?
I'm going to stop everybody talking about they don't have them. Just listen. Do I believe that in the political arena that people kind of orchestrate different things to deter people from voting? Absolutely. What do you think the riots were about? What do you think January 6th was about? What do you think the whole issue with election integrity was about? It was to create apathy, and they did a good job of it. But as far as having systemic policies that are in place that actually deter it, it irritates me, and it's actually disrespectful to my ancestors who are still alive, who was part of the civil rights movement, for people to say it's Jim Crow. You do not have to take a literacy test to go in and vote. I mean, some of us would fail it right now if we had to take a literacy test. You don't have to take a histrionic test to determine whether you're not, and it's not selective, the questions that you have to take. That was systemic. What we have right now is what basic people do. If you've ever cashed a check, bought cigarettes, bought alcohol, if you've ever went to a club, if you ever went and applied for a job, you got an ID. Now, you paid $32 or $35 at the DDS to get that ID. You can go down to your North Courthouse and get it for absolutely free. That is not a election issue. I think what happens when it comes to voting is that we have used people as opportunity commodities in the voting arena. We don't really take into consideration the issues that are painting them and causing them issues. We use that to get to the level that we want to be. And that's something that I believe actually causes problems with voters, because they don't know who to choose, who to believe, and they are left in peril. So if you want to talk about voter suppression and things of that nature, then let's talk about how we as politicians conduct ourselves when we promise people one thing and deliver another. Let's talk about those kind of things. See, now that's an oppression. But as far as the rules and regulations for voting, leave it alone. It works. You didn't feel that way before the Obama. You didn't feel that way before Trump. You didn't feel that way before Joe Biden. Now the issue is, are we going to stop the nuances and the crazy and actually get to the root of the issue, which is the politicians themselves? It's not voting.
Thank you. All right. What would be your legislative goals, and how would that impact the counties in your district?
My legislative goals is to make sure we level the playing field. Now, I am not one who believes in equity, okay? I do not believe that everybody deserves the same outcome, but I do believe everybody deserves the same opportunity. And definitely going through the 4th district, from top to bottom, there is a distinct lack of opportunity that's afforded to people, and it is from people who are in leadership that chooses who they'll support, who they won't, what they'll do. I mean, when you have a school system that gets money, and they'd rather give each other bonuses than to fix a high school that has mold and kids are eating with crap under their feet, then that's a clear depiction that there is some sort of oppression going on. So I do believe that opportunity needs to be provided. So I will advocate very heavily. Like I said from the very beginning, infrastructure is great because you can't get to work all the time driving. And it would be a lot better for businesses when they come in, when they see a mass transit system that works. Not sure MARTA's the one that should head it, but I will just say that we do need some sort of transit. And that's something that the people have to decide, but definitely I can advocate for the funding. Opportunity zones is always a wonderful thing, especially the minority community, any community, it doesn't even really matter. There's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit that's going on, and I think we need to feed that. I think that's what created America to even begin with. And I think if we're going to get back to excellence, we need to feed that. So I will definitely push for opportunity zones, things of those natures. I'm definitely going to look at some repealing of some regulations. I think a lot of times people can't start their businesses and sustain them. I think people think when they start, there's a little profit. No, you're not profitable for about 3 to 5 years. So, we need to do that. I think we need to fuel some education on finance. Basic balance checkbook, pay taxes, what is profitable, what's not, what does it take to actually get a loan? Some people think it's just credit score. It's not. There's a lot of things that you need to know. And I think those are my 3 primary areas that I will target for our district.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for answering all the top questions that were submitted by our citizens. At this time, can you close us out with any further information you'd like the voters to know about yourself, your campaign, and how they can get in touch with you?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, people in Newton County, Rockdale, DeKalb, listen, I hear you. I'm one of you. I'm tired too. My grocery bill's outrageous. My gas prices are outrageous. And I just need help. And I know some of you guys feel the same way. And I'm offering that help. Not only do I have the business acumen to do it, but I got the heart to do it because I understand what it's like to want a better life for your future, for yourself, and for your children. And I want to provide that to you. I believe that God's gifted me with the ability to persuade and to cajole. And I think that he's given me a good strategic mind that can go and forecast and forethink. And I want to offer that to you. I also want to offer you somebody who's willing to take action. I'm in your community now. I'm doing a lot of what we're saying, but I just don't have the power and the strength to do it on the magnitude that I need to. But if you'll trust me, if you'll give me an opportunity, I will show you that my words match my deeds, and you'll be pleased with what I bring to Congress. If you want to know more about me, go to www.ivy4ga.com. That's www.ivy4ga.com. I always respond. I will always be there, and you'll see that that's true if you decide to allow me to represent you in Capitol Hill.
Thank you.